Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. Today I'm going to talk about a book called Slaying Your Fear by Adam Lane Smith. It's actually in the self-help genre, interestingly, which is both might be useful to people who need to help themselves, and also a place where you often find what might loosely call pop philosophy. By which I mean philosophy made available to a popular audience. Popular in that sense of like common. The hoi polloi that is common to the many. That is another way of putting that is accessible. So I found there are a number of interesting self-help books. There are lots of bad self-help books, of course, which is why I'm making this video recommending one, save people time. So it's talking about insecurity. And insecurity in human relationships. The he describes it in very in detail, and he describes it very well, very vividly. I mean, but very loosely, insecurity being a sort of persistent fear that other people are going to reject one. And the reason I got interested in this was actually after a conversation with the author on Twitter. Because insecurity is, in that sense, so social insecurity is sort of a blind spot I have. I just don't really relate to it or understand it. The reason being, I grew up extremely unpopular. I was, I'd have a friend or two, sometimes three. I tended to be pretty disliked when I was young. I had a very large vocabulary. I had the nickname the Walking Talking Dictionary. And an awful lot of people disliked me. And so that was normal to me. I grew up that way, and there's sort of two lessons that came from that very rapidly. One is that even if most people dislike you, not everyone is going to dislike you. And two, that's fine. I mean, life was fine. I mean, there were people who picked on me, but now I will say I was fortunate. I was always sort of large for my age. I'm 6 feet tall, pretty much exactly. So I'm on the shortest end of tall. In terms of adults, but I hit that relatively early, and I just tended to be tall for my age, and relatively strong, and so nobody ever was going to really push this physically. It wouldn't have been a great idea. Not that I necessarily would have won, but whoever tried to attack me would not have come out unscathed, and so they generally didn't. So it was only, verbal. It was only on the level of social rejection, on the level of teasing me and so on. And you know what? Like I can insult people back. I can tease people back, and it taught me several useful lessons. Some of the ones I mentioned. Another one being other people's opinions of you are only useful insofar as they are correct, because you'll get offered, if you're unpopular, all sorts of opinions. Occasionally they are useful, like actually, in virtue of having a big vocabulary, I wasn't always that good at explaining things to people, because I would use words that people my age, and I'm talking, when I was like, 4th grade, 5th grade, and so on, wouldn't understand. And, it was actually a fair criticism. And, I had all sorts of interests that most people didn't share, that they didn't really find very interesting. And in consequence, my conversation was not very interesting to them. And, well, fair enough. I mean, it was kind of useful to know. And I found the people to whom my conversation was interesting and talked to them. So, insecurity in that sense, like the worry that people are going to reject you, it's kind of not a big deal if people reject you, and it's never going to be everyone who's going to reject you. It's just not how people work. So insecurity in this sense is just a blind spot. I'm not saying that I look down on it or anything, but rather it's like a blind spot in the sense of I just don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And this book really helped me to understand it a lot better. At least in sort of like a practical, functional sort of sense. And so I found it very interesting for that reason, that it really explains sort of the mindset, and in consequence, the mindset and the actions the person takes because of that mindset. And because of that, especially the actions it takes, the actions the person does because of a mindset really help to describe what the mindset itself is. So, I like learning about my fellow creatures, and especially ones who I don't understand very well. The ones I do understand, well, I kind of already do. So that's, not the place to learn. It's the blind spots that I really want to fill in. And this really helped me in that regard to understand people going through certain things better, much better than I did at first. So it's very interesting for that regard. And for anyone who doesn't really find social insecurity very intelligible, I recommend this book as describing it. Now, on the flip side, as a self-help book, what was kind of fascinating, I recognized a number of people I know in these descriptions. I was rather surprised by that, actually. But once I saw the descriptions, like just a number of commonalities in a bunch of people I know sort of came together for me. And what was interesting is I then saw in various conversations I'd had, because every now and again, somebody will ask me for advice. It's not super common, but I've been on the planet for 40 years, so it's happened a number of times. And one of the things, like a particular example, and I'm just going to give one, there's lots that's in the book. A particular example that I found very interesting was where he talked about turning from living life based upon fear to living a life based upon principles. And the function of it is to develop several principles and then to stick to them as best you can, recognizing you're going to fail from time to time. But and it's things like honesty or compassion or to help people or various things but principles that you're not going to violate. Because like one thing insecure people, honesty was one he talked about a lot, because one thing insecure people often do is lie because their fear drives them into trying to please people in ways that aren't maintainable. And what he described is there will be times when by being honest, you'll cause unpleasant situations. You may even lose, a few relationships by being honest. But what he talked about is, but there'll also be relationships that you gain by being honest, and many relationships you strengthen by being honest and going through the tough times that honesty may cause. In the beginning, you'll come out much stronger. So he talks about that sort of thing. And its usefulness in figuring out how to navigate that anxiety to come out, to get through it, to push through the innate fear and to build strong relationships that you can be comfortable in instead of being afraid of constantly losing. I'm not doing justice to the particulars of that, but the part about principles, one thing I found very interesting is I had some conversations with friends about authenticity, and I actually mentioned to a friend, like, well, authenticity is easy. Just figure out what your principles are, then do your best to live up to them, acknowledging that you're going to fail. And well, congratulations, you're authentic. That's an authentic life, is trying and unfortunately sometimes failing, picking up the pieces and trying again to live according to your principles. That's it. There's nothing magical. It's not some transcendent state where you float above the ground in supported by your aura of authenticity. It's just the daily grind of trying to do the right thing, trying to live the good life in the sense of the life of virtue. That's what authenticity is. I mean, if you do that, you're going to be authentic because you're going to authentically try to live up to something. You will sometimes authentically succeed. You will sometimes authentically fail. And you pick up a piece and keep going. And so it was interesting seeing that advice, which may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people. I don't know how intelligible that is generally as advice on how to be authentic. In the particular case of the person I was talking to, it did make sense there, but it was really interesting to see presented in a much more general way something that seemed very similar to me about the re-architecting your life to be about principles, and then the good things that come from that and how it enables you to let go of fear. He doesn't put it like this, but because principles are bigger than you connect yourself to something greater than yourself, and therefore you derive strength from that, because by connecting yourself to something greater than yourself, you become more. Anyway, so if anybody does suffer from social insecurity, I have a strong suspicion this book will actually be very useful to you. As I said, my interest in it was primarily sort of the philosophical side of coming to understand this phenomenon I don't understand very well. But there's a lot in it that it's very, very accessible. It's well written. It's derived from, he's a licensed marriage, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. And so a lot of this derives from, many years of experience helping people and seeing what worked and what didn't and so on. So for anyone suffering from insecurity, I really recommend the book on that angle too. And not quite as qualified to recommend it, but then who really is, it's going to be everything that actually helps a person is going to be particular to that person and the particular thing that helps them. So I can only guess anyone making recommendation can only guess. That said, I do strongly guess this would help people who are suffering from that. It also, I think, is very much worth reading for anybody who might know anyone suffering from social insecurity, because it'll both help to teach you what they're going through, how to help them, and also you might be in a good position to recommend, if you have it to lend to them, you might be able to get them to read it, and that might help them too. So, yeah, I really recommend this book. It's available on Amazon. I'll try to remember to link it in the description. And I really recommend it. It's a good book. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.